This is the Domain Magnet Show, where you'll learn everything you need to know about buying, optimizing, and selling online businesses with your host, Michael Beroslavsky.
Hello, listeners. Today we have Joseph Magnotti, the co-founder and CEO of Empire Flippers. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Michael. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for joining us today. So as usual, we love to dive into numbers just from the beginning. And I know that Empire Flippers have been more open about their numbers than most. So I'd love to know what is your current revenue, or what are some other numbers you can tell us?
Yeah, I mean, we do our quarterly reports, and those reports are available on our blog. So if anyone wants to see our numbers at any time, they can see those top line numbers right now. But through the end of August, we've done in total sales, we've done almost $30 million in business, and that's through 190 different sales. So, we have a lot of volume going through Empire Flippers and a good amount of revenue as well. That equals about almost $4 million in fees. Our goal is, to do $6 million this year. So we are on track, and I think we're growing quite well. We're about 40% over where we were in 2018. So that's a good number. And as you know, we made the Inc. 500 list for 4 years in a row now, and that's been a great achievement.
So in 2009, in 2019, do you expect a higher revenue than 2018?
Yeah, we expect to be about 40% bigger.
So what do you expect to be the total this year, more or less?
Yeah, I mean, total sales volume in terms of like the size of the deals that we do will probably be around 45 million, and then our total commissions will be about $6 million.
All right, so the revenue, like what Empire Flippers makes in total from commissions and listing fees, is about 6 million this year.
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
And are you profitable? Are you going to make some profit on that?
Oh, we're going to be very profitable. We're a bootstrap company. Justin and I, my business partner, own the business 50-50. We have no debt. We have no investors. So staying profitable is important for us. Otherwise, it comes right out of our pocket. Our margins run about 38%. So you can do the math there yourself. We do pretty well.
Nice. And what would you say your main expenses are? Would that be for employees or marketing?
Definitely employees. Labor, it's a labor-based business. It's a service-based business, Michael. So that's going to be the number one way of, having a lot of payments going out. Our major expenses are employees. But there's a reasonable expectation that you're going to have a good number of employees. We almost have 60 employees right now. And if you're going to be a white glove service in a high touch environment, you're going to need that number.
Yeah, absolutely. So you just recently crossed 60 employees, and I recall seeing that you put a freeze on hiring. Is that right? Or are you still hiring now?
We are hiring to replace and expand a little bit right now. We had that hiring freeze in the beginning of the year, but we have loosened that up a bit, and we're looking to hire more in Q4 as we go into 2020, because we expect a larger expansion in 2020.
Yeah, that seems to be the best way to go about it. You always have to be on the lookout for good talent, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you lose people and you're in this kind of business, you have to replace them quickly. And so we definitely have an HR machine that simply sits there and hires people. But the good news is our turnover rate is fairly low, and we've never had to lay people off or reduce the size of our company in any way because we've had constant growth.
Yeah, that's great. And are most of your employees now in the Philippines?
No, most of our employees are Westerners who are spread out throughout the world. Now, we don't have a centralized office, but we have, many people living in America, some living in South America, some living in Asia. We do have a number of Filipinos that work for us, roughly 20. So about 1/3 of the staff is Filipino. They're in the South here in Davao City. And they handle frontline, low-level customer service and some basic number crunching, stuff like that we need help with. But the rest of the staff is Westernized.
Nice. And I'm curious, how do you hire? So you have this remote company and mostly Westerners all over the world. Do you have like a centralized way to hire people there? We go through a certain system, or do you get most people from referrals from your existing employees? How does it mostly work?
Most of them come directly to us. Our brand and our reputation, and obviously the offer that we give is pretty good. We give worldwide health benefits. We allow people to work from anywhere. Very competitive salaries. So, you combine all those things plus an interesting, fun place to work. And a lot of people, want the job. So we typically, when we put a job post up, we get about 100 applicants.
Wow.
So, if we're only hiring 2 or 3, we can take the cream of the crop.
Yeah, that can be exhausting. We were hiring for a position earlier this year and they had about 85 applicants. And it's really a long process to interview everyone, to review resumes, and we try to have a couple interviews with each person.
Yeah, so the secret to that, in my opinion, is to have a YouTube video. So every applicant needs to have a YouTube video. If they don't have a YouTube video, they go right to the trash.
Yeah, we do that for some. Like we do it for positions that kind of require the person to be, more engaged. But for some more technical positions, I found that many people just don't really like that. They don't feel comfortable. Like someone who is going to be in support, doing WordPress migrations.
Right. No, and I understand what you're saying. And that's why I think you got to clearly explain that in the job post. So if they read the job post, they understand why the video is so important. Look, we get an overwhelming number of applicants. We can't interview everybody. If we have a 2.5-minute video from you, we get a little bit of an idea of who you are. So please submit that. And that usually works out fairly well and is a good sort of first way for us to filter from everybody. From there, we go through a second round of interviews and then perhaps even a third round of interviews before we make our final decision. Okay,
so first they upload a video on YouTube and then there is an interview, like 30 minutes, an hour, and then the second interview?
Yeah. So not only do they have to upload a video, but they have to answer a number of questions. So there's a survey and a form that they have to fill out along with their video. And that gives us a good idea of who we're working with. The first round of videos is a quick intro interview. It's about 15 minutes. And we're usually able to clearly make sure that they can meet the requirements, do the job, that sort of thing, make sure that they understand what kind of job they're getting into. And that disqualifies a lot of people there as well. The last interview would be, 45 minutes to an hour. And that's really for the small core group when you're trying to make a decision between, 5 or 6 people when you have to hire 2.
Yeah. Have you used any process for hiring, something like top grading, or did you just design your own?
We designed our own. We use Google Sheets and we just track everything in there. And the survey flows directly into Google Sheets via Google Forms. That works out really well for us.
Nice. So continuing with numbers, what's the current sort of average time for people to sell their website for Empire Flippers?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, Michael. The straight answer is the average deal is on our marketplace for 42 days. And we actually have a scoreboard, which I'll give you a link to, that will show you all these numbers in real time. It pulls from our database and puts up all those numbers.
That's pretty good.
It's very good. Now, that does not include the vetting time and the migration time. Those are additional. A couple of weeks for vetting where we have to get all the numbers right. We have to make sure we have to get the pricing right. And then maybe a couple of weeks for migration. So all in all, usually we can sell a business from first contact and submission to all the way to getting the money directly in the hand of the seller in 3 months.
So let's say if I'm listing today, and then there is a process of wedding and it said something like 4 or 5 months. So
yeah, we've gotten a lot faster. We've gotten a lot better. And I would say that the deal size is really dependent on determining how quickly people get paid out. So for instance, a $50,000 business sells a lot faster than $1 million business. And that's something that we have to make sellers clearly understand. But when we're doing an average, saying 3 to 4 months is pretty good.
So you mentioned you had, what about 200 deals this year? So like how many deals do you usually close every day or every week?
Yeah, we do between 25 and 30 deals a month, maybe a little bit below that. I think our average this year is about 23, 24 a month. But, we did have a couple of months where we only closed 17, so they brought down the average a little bit. Our goal was to do a deal a day, 365 deals, but that's a lot. I don't think we're going to achieve that, but we're going to come close. We'll definitely do 300 plus.
Yeah, that's pretty close. And what's the average deal like? Is it about 100,000 or more?
Yeah, average deal size is on the rise. Every year it's been going up and up. In 2018, it was about $111,000. This year it's up to $152,000. It might even go higher as we go into Q4 and close out some larger deals.
That's pretty good. So I know that you've been publishing numbers for quite some time now, and it seems that people love it, especially in this industry that everyone is being very secretive about everything.
And I think it's really important to be transparent in any business, but especially ours. So we want to make sure that people know how many people we have working for us, what our general revenue numbers are like. We don't talk exactly about expenses because we don't want to be giving away the whole shop. But we definitely can talk about general numbers and where our revenue and most of our money comes from.
So it looks like it's been very helpful for marketing to create a more positive image of Empire Flippers, especially compared to the competition. So I'm curious, how did you originally decide on that? And did you find that to be really helpful in marketing in general?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. When we started out as AdSense flippers, we used to do monthly numbers, and that was a big thing back in the early 2010s. I don't know if you know, but a lot of bloggers and online business people were talking about their monthly income report. And so once we, transported the company into Empire Flippers and really started focusing on our marketplace and connecting buyers and sellers, we started to do a quarterly report because we thought it was interesting to keep those numbers going. It does help a lot with marketing because people trust and understand us. They know that we're not hiding any money or hiding deals or saying we're doing off marketplace deals. We can really rely on the data that we're putting out there.
Yeah, it seems that transparency is just becoming more and more popular lately, and it's changing many different industries and businesses.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think that this is the wave of the future. Just like I think remote teams and, being able to have distributed teams. We just did a podcast a couple of weeks ago on distributed teams. I really think that, this is the wave of the future, just like transparency is too, because it's kind of critical in order to build trust in a niche and become the authority in order to know that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's great that you've adopted this approach, and it looks like some people in the industry are starting to copy you. So we had an interview with Blake, with the CEO of Flipper, and Flipper are not very open about their numbers, but I've definitely noticed in the past year that they are kind of pushing more towards trying to be more upfront about things as well and sharing kind of more details. It looks like you are driving that push in the industry. So that's nice.
Yeah. I mean, we try to be first in the industry. Definitely, we want to be the leader and we want to be out there. We were the first ones to come out with private listings. Before that, if you were on Flippa, you had to reveal your URL. We were the first ones to do it the other way around, especially by making sure that people had to place a refundable deposit before getting all of this information. That was a big push for us. And so we think that a lot of the initiatives that we've talked about and we've pushed are the way to go. And it's good to see that someone like Flippa is coming along for the ride.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get a little bit more into the process of how it works with Empire Flippers. Mm-hmm. And I'm actually curious because we haven't used Empire Flippers yet on either side. So let's say that I am a first-time seller and I want to sell a business, let's say like $200,000. So can you explain briefly how it would work? So I submit an application, right? And what happens next?
Yeah, so you submit your application. There's a form that you'll go through that will ask some normal questions. And then that form will create a ticket in our Zendesk system that our vetting team will follow up on. Our vetting team will take your numbers and begin to create a P&L that will have all the numbers in there for you. And it's a normalized P&L. So our buyers are very used to seeing a P&L in the same format. All of our businesses use the same format. Instead of having, a format that comes this way, a format that comes that way, a prospectus is this way, all of our listings use the same format, and that's very valuable to our buyers. But our vetting team fixes that up for you. Our vetting team does that. All of that is there and ready to do hand holding through the entire process. The next step is pricing, is to make sure that the pricing is good for you. Our vetting team, again, comes with the pricing. We use our valuation tool in order to make sure that we do get accurate pricing. It's not just a marketing ploy. We actually do use the valuation tool in pricing because we think after having all of this data that we do have valuable pricing data. There is some back and forth there, of course. Some sellers think that their business is more valuable or less valuable. Maybe they want to sell quicker, so they're willing to do a less price. Some were willing to wait longer, so they're willing to do more of a price. And our valuation tool gives ranges, and I encourage your audience to go ahead and check that out.
So let's see. So first, I submitted the application, and I add my numbers, and also probably some screenshots or videos right away.
Yeah, we're going to verify all that information by getting back to you and asking for proof of that revenue. Correct.
So how soon would you usually respond to a client that filled out the application? Would it be quickly?
Yeah, you're going to get the first response within 24 hours. So
okay, and then I submit instructions. So I'm going to send some more proofs and videos and screenshots, explain how things work. And then the next step you mentioned is evaluation. Would it happen like a week later or so on average?
No, it's going to happen.
A few days?
They're going to get back to you within a couple of days and keep asking for more information if there's anything not clear, if there's anything that we need to build out that we don't understand. For larger, more complex businesses, we'll just have a call and my team will go through that with you and answer everything in kind of a live interview.
Okay.
So after that vetting stage, we move on to the sales stage. And one of the first things we do is we do an interview with you that's for public consumption. We're one of the only brokerages out there that does what we call the seller interview, which is something we put on our listing page. Again, our buyers love this because they can hear directly from the seller's mouth exactly what they're talking about and what went into it. We hide the URL. We hide any private numbers so no one can figure out what the actual business is. But it does review that and is an interview with the seller. So that's the first part of the sales process. And the next step would be for the listing to go out to all of our 120,000 people on our email list. We go ahead, we tell them at 10 a.m. Eastern time on every Monday. Everyone gets all the new listings at the same time. We think that's very valuable in creating a marketplace because it's fair, it's balanced. Once we do that, people will express interest either through a refundable deposit or by a VIP code, and our salespeople will follow up. We'll set up a buyer-seller conference call. The buyer-seller conference call between the buyer, the seller, and an EF employee will always be there to hold your hand throughout the entire process. There might be some negotiations back and forth after that call. We'll agree on a price. The buyer will pay us, and Empire Flippers will hold on to the business. And then our migration team will come in and actually move the business from the seller to the buyer. And once that is complete and revenue is verified, then we go ahead and release the money to the seller.
Okay, so let's go a bit into details.
Mhm.
First of all, what happens if I don't like the price? Let's say you offer a price at about 30x and I want 60x. I think my business is amazing. What's going to happen?
Yeah. So if you're in the vetting process and you say, I want 60x, and that's outside of our valuation tool range. So we have two ranges. We have what we call our absolute range and our typical range. We like to keep our pricing within our typical range because we know it's going to sell in a reasonable time period. But if you're willing to wait longer or you need to sell very quickly, you can use the absolute range. But if 60x is even outside the absolute range, we won't do business with you unless you're willing to be flexible and come within that pricing. We'll simply say, sorry, we're not willing to represent you, because the business will never sell at that level. And we would be honestly doing a disservice to our buyers because we'd be overcharging them and no one's willing to pay that.
So if the price is too high, you would just refuse to list it, right?
That's correct.
And does that happen often?
Does not happen often. We do reject about 2/3 of the business that come our way, but most of that is not because of pricing problems. Most of that is because people think that they make $10,000 a month, but they only make $7 when you go through all the numbers. People may have other things that we don't do any porn or gambling at Empire Flippers. Anything illegal, unethical, like hacking or anything like that. So all those kind of sites that may use something like that, we'd have to reject those. Obviously, outright scams are going to be rejected. But most of it now is discrepancy in the numbers. Once they provide, they say, I make $10,000 a month. The proof that they provide only provides $7,000 a month. Now they'd rather work on the business. The seller rather work on the business and get it up to 10,000. Rather than sell at 7,000 and get a lower price.
Yeah, we found that happens a lot. Like a lot of people come to us as well and say, we have a business that makes $10,000. But once we actually look at the numbers, look at screenshots, it's maybe just $3,500 per month or something like that. Mm-hmm. People always assume it makes more, and people often don't take expenses into the account. So how do you deal with that? Do you have many sellers that come to you and they just say, they just say, I don't spend any money on it, or I don't put any time to it. So how would you check that?
Yeah, well, that's another great question. And the thing is because we've been doing this so long and we have so much volume, we know the right questions to ask for each type of business. So, if you have a content business and you say, well, it doesn't cost me anything. Well, no, you have hosting, you have a domain name, it costs you something. Do you add any content every month? I mean, these are questions we know to ask, we know to go through, and we know to make sure to put on the P&L. So our team is very familiar with this kind of stuff. If we were working with a physical product business, we'd say, okay, what are your costs of goods sold? How much you're paying your supplier? Can you provide us an invoice that shows how much you're doing that for? These kind of questions are very, very important to verify that the expenses are correct. And we think it's a key part of the process.
So if I'm saying that, I write all the content, I do all the backlinks, are you going to kind of calculate how much it would usually cost and then add that as expenses? Or would you just add kind of more
if the owner does it himself, no, we wouldn't use that as an expense. What we would say, though, is you're working so many hours a week that you're going to get a lower multiple. So that's how we adjust for owner hours. If you're doing everything yourself and you're working 40 hours a week, you're going to get a very low multiple. And honestly, it's probably going to be very hard to sell your business because nobody wants to buy a job, right? Where it does get interesting is where somebody says, oh, I only work 5 hours a week. We have somebody else come in and say, there's no way you could do that in 5 hours. You need 20 hours to do that. And that's where we start negotiating and we start working and seeing if there's some way to work out a deal.
Yeah, that happens all the time. Absolutely. So that makes sense. It sounds like a good system. And as a seller, I understand that I would have to sign an exclusive agreement. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, you have to sign an exclusive agreement for 6 months with us. And like we were talking about before, if the average sell time is 3 to 4 months, this gives us enough time with a little leeway in order to make sure that your listing is sold.
And is there some kind of leeway? Can it be shorter, or is 6 months the absolute, like the minimum?
No, it's definitely the minimum, and it's a requirement to list with us. And the reason is because if we're going to go through this entire vetting process, And then we're going to go through this entire sales process and negotiate with buyers and do all this marketing of your listing. And then all of a sudden you pull the listing and go somewhere else. We've spent a lot of money and a lot of time and effort and energy on that. We should be compensated for that.
Yeah. Have you had that happen? Like if I listed a website and then suddenly another buyer that I was talking to before decided to accept an offer. So I understand that I would still be liable for paying the commissions, right? Is that something that happens sometimes?
It's very, very rare, Michael, because here's the thing is most sellers find our service valuable enough to pay the percentage, right? I mean, most sellers don't want to migrate the business from their server and their stuff to the other guy's server. They don't want to be in charge of that. They're afraid they're going to mess it up. So they love the idea of us coming in and doing that. Yes, you sign an agreement that says even if you find the buyer, you owe us the commission. That is correct, but I think we provide enough value that we close that buyer. Because here's the thing you got to think about. Even though you know that buyer outside of Empire Flippers, now that it's listed on Empire Flippers, it might have motivated him to buy it, right? And now that he's getting, a P&L in a nice, pretty format, he's getting a nice listing paging, describing everything, he's getting all these other services. That's the real reason why he went ahead and pulled the trigger, not because he knew you beforehand.
Yeah, makes sense. And so the next step you mentioned is a seller would have to talk to some buyers potentially. How many calls would I need to make as a seller? Would there be like 10 different calls with other buyers? So probably just one on average or two.
On average, you would probably take 3 or 4 buyer-seller conference calls. But again, there is a wide range. The smaller deals go so quickly that most people don't even want to do a call. They just know they buy it. Under $30,000 list price, we can't hold on to the businesses more than 24 hours. They just people buy them so quickly. But when people start to get into the 6 figures, especially the mid 6 figures and 7-figure deals, people want to talk to the seller, and that's understandable. And you should expect to have, a couple of phone calls with different prospects and maybe even an additional call for negotiation and details. But the great thing is because we're actually the broker and not just the marketplace at Empire Flippers, we're able to provide a person to be on the call with you and represent you as the seller. So we can make sure we do a prep call. We prepare you the things to say, things to not to say, how to stay away from certain, dangerous situations, and know more about the buyer before going in. We do a whole presentation for you. We prepare something, a slideshow that has typical questions and numbers so that the buyer can be walked through a process.
Nice. So you act as a broker for the seller. So you generally protect the seller's interest the most. Is that right?
Correct. I mean, we have a fiduciary responsibility to the seller. That's for sure. We represent the seller in the end.
Okay, that's great. And in terms of buyers, so if I'm a buyer and I go to Empire Flippers, can you describe the process? So let's say I see a listing that I like on one of those Monday newsletters. So I understand that first I would have to submit a deposit. Is that right?
Well, a refundable deposit. That deposit cannot be used to buy the business. And if the business is sold to anybody else, the deposit's refunded. And if you decide to buy the business, the deposit's refunded as well. You have to pay by wire. That's the only type of transfer that we accept. There's also, if we've done business with you before, or you're involved in one of our groups, or a buyer or seller, or you can provide a statement of liquidity from your CPA or accountant, something like that, we'll give you a VIP code. And the VIP code will allow you to bypass the refundable deposit system and get directly into the details and start doing your own due diligence. Okay,
so I've done that and I've looked at the business and I decided that I have a few questions. So when I want to schedule an interview call with the seller, right? And that can be done through your system as well.
That's correct. Yeah. We call it the buyer seller conference call, and that's done directly through our system. So
do I have direct access? Can I ask questions to the seller directly?
Yes. Well, not directly. Those questions will be fielded by us because here's the thing: is we don't want to bother a seller with 100 of the same questions. If we already know the answer, we'll go ahead and provide that answer. If we don't know the answer, then we'll go ahead and ask the seller and get back to you. But we really do encourage buyers to immediately set up a buyer-seller conference call if they're at all interested in a listing, because the back and forth via email can be delayed. It's a cumbersome process, whereas a phone call can get it all out in an hour, right? And so that's really the process that we try to make sure to stick to at Empire Flippers. But the thing about scheduling a call is sometimes with multiple time zones and all this kind of stuff, it's a nightmare, right? Well, for us, we have a custom application that schedules a call between you as the buyer, our seller, and somebody at Empire Flippers. And so that call will be scheduled. A half an hour will be done with the seller beforehand in order to prepare him, make sure he's ready for the call, and then an hour between the buyer, the seller, and the EF representative.
Okay, makes sense. So as a buyer, I scheduled a call, I discussed things, and now I decided I want to buy it. So the next step is for me to send the funds, the wire transfer, right?
That's correct. If you buy for full list price, then you get the business as soon as we receive your funds, and so we would proceed to migration after that. If you think the business is overpriced or you think you want to get a deal, then you could make an offer lower than list price. If your lower than list price offer is accepted, we run that lower than list price offer against any and all active depositors. Those other active depositors would have a chance to beat your offer. And if they go ahead and beat your offer, then you would have a chance to also beat them back. And then we get into a little bit of a race. But you will never pay more than list price at Empire Flippers. And that's the guarantee that we can provide.
Okay, that's good. So I've completed the purchase, I've sent the funds, and then your migration team helps transfer it to my account. Does your migration team also help change some affiliate IDs, AdSense codes, things like that?
Yeah, we change all the codes for you. We change, all the affiliate codes, all the AdSense codes. Those all can be done by our team. We transfer the website from one hosting to another if necessary. The only thing we can't provide, obviously, if there's any training needed, then obviously the seller would need to provide that. But we'll set up a call. We'll make sure that's run smoothly. And the other thing that a buyer should look out for, that's something we do that nobody else does, is we allow a 2-week inspection period where the revenue needs to be within a certain amount in order to make sure that the deal goes through. Because if we transfer everything over and you were expected to make $10,000 a month and you only made $2,000, then we know that something is wrong. Either a code is wrong, something's wrong, maybe you got unlucky, maybe we just need to do another inspection period, or the business has been damaged in some way. And that is a very safe way to transfer online businesses to make sure you're not getting a lemon. And it's something that buyers for us find very, very valuable.
That's quite interesting. So first of all, how big is the difference? Let's say the business is supposed to make $10,000 and it makes 8.5. Is that okay, or is that a cause for concern?
Yeah, for us, the threshold is 50%. Now, that is negotiable. Sometimes we've seen buyers say, look, it needs to be higher than that. Or buyers say, look, I don't really care so much about it, and the threshold is not important to me. It can be 0%. So it is something that we put in as a goalpost to be 50%.
Okay, so what happens if the site is making only 4,000 instead of 10,000? What does the process look like? Yeah,
so the process would be one of two things. The buyer can either get his money back and the deal is off, or the buyer and the seller can renegotiate. Obviously, we try to encourage some renegotiation at this point, either a lower price point, an extended evaluation period. So, for instance, there was just the holidays coming up, the Memorial Day holiday when the Labor Day holiday, when all of the online business is much lower. So if you have an inspection period that includes those 3-4 days, you might not hit the exact numbers that you were thinking because, hey, most people are on vacation, they're on the road, they're not on Amazon buying stuff. There's really two ways. It's just the deal is off or renegotiate.
And what happens if there is a disagreement? You know, the buyer wants one thing, the seller wants another. How would you solve a potential
We would
conflict?
just call the deal off and stick to the asset, whatever the asset purchase agreement is. Obviously, there's some terms in there. We do that, but at the end of the day, you know, we could just call the deal off, refund the buyer, and then find a new buyer for the seller.
And what if the seller? So some things that happened to us once is you refunded it, and you know there is a problem because the seller says that the buyer damaged the website in those 2 weeks. You know, the buyer changed some things and they want some compensation for it. What do you do then?
Well, our terms clearly say if you break it, you buy it. And if you make changes to the website as the buyer before the inspection period is up, any changes to the website, you own the website. And that's how we prevent that from happening.
Even changes like changing the hosting, because even changing the hosting account, you know, could have some effect.
When we do our migration, you have to do a migration to the exact same account at the exact same level. If you choose a different account, like a cheaper account or something like that, you're basically breaking the terms of service and you own the website. Okay, but our migration people wouldn't allow that to happen. We would say, you realize if you do this, you own the website and the inspection period's over because this hosting is not as fast as the other hosting, and that's going to cause other problems. And so, you know, we wouldn't be able to do a proper inspection period. So you're calling off your inspection as the buyer. 99% of buyers are going to say, okay, I'll just do the same exact hosting that they have.
Yeah, so that makes sense. So the 2 weeks inspection, everything just stays the same and there is no change.
Right.
So if there is a problem, you know that it's not caused by the buyer, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've had buyers who are not so concerned about that. They want to get in there and start getting their hands dirty, and they even call off the inspection period. Look, go ahead, pay the seller off because I know that I have paid traffic coming in. I know that I can make some CRO changes today to increase, you know, and double my income. I don't need the inspection period. So we definitely are flexible in those kind of things, and we understand that not every sale is going to be the same thing.
Yeah, and what happens if, as a buyer, you know, everything completed, the inspection period is over, and then maybe a month or a couple months later, our revenue just drops sharply, like 70% or 80%. As a buyer, would they have any kind of recourse, or that's it?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no recourse. There's no warranties at that point. If you've allowed the inspection period to go over, you've allowed the seller to be paid out. Once the seller is paid out, the deal is considered complete, and there is no recourse.
All right, makes sense. It sounds like the system is well thought out, and I know you've been doing it for a while, so you've definitely changed and tweaked things over the years.
Well, this comes from us being buyers and sellers. You know, we are not just some corporation that decided to jump into this. Justin and I did use the Flippa system for a long time, and we saw that there were significant drawbacks to it, you know. And one of them was this sort of post-sale period where there was nobody to help you. You had to figure it out yourself. And if there was a dispute between the buyer and the seller, there was no one to figure it out. Yeah, you can go to somebody like escrow.com, but they're going to throw you into third-party arbitration. Third-party arbitration typically has an old retired judge who doesn't know much about technology. And Justin and I actually went through that with a purchase that we made on Flippa. We wound up losing, and we got a lemon that made $0, even it was supposed to make a couple of $1,000. So, you know, he didn't really understand. He just said, well, the domain name and the business has been transferred. If it doesn't make any money, that's your fault. Even though we obviously got scammed. So this was a system that not only we designed for sellers to be protected, but for buyers to be protected as well. And we think it is a very even and fair system.
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned that because we have the CEO of escrow.com in one of our next podcasts, Matt Berry, and it's going to be interesting to ask his opinion on that.
Look, I think the escrow.com guys are great if you're buying cars, houses, or boats. But unfortunately for online businesses, they're just not the online business experts. And if there's going to be a dispute, they're not going to try to handle it themselves. And they're just going to throw you into third-party arbitration, who are even worse and don't know anything about online business.
Right. And I'm curious if you have any data regarding your buyers, regarding their success, how many people lose money, how many people are successful with their purchases. If you have some kind of follow-up with them, you know, a few months later, I can tell you, according to some data we've seen and some data we've seen from different markets, most first-time buyers actually lose money. I'm curious if that's similar with your experience.
Definitely not the same with our experience, but we're a lot more selective with our sellers, and therefore we're able to be a lot more selective with our buyers. So if you come to us, and the first question we're going to ask you is, have you ever run an online business before? You're a buyer, right? We'll say, have you ever run an online business before? And your answer is no. And we're going to say, do you know what hosting is? And you say no. And I say, have you ever bought a domain name? And you say no. And I said, do you know what GoDaddy is? Do you have a GoDaddy account? And you say no. We're going to say, you can't buy from us. I don't care if you have $500,000. You can't buy from us because you're not going to be a very successful buyer. And we want to make sure that our success rate is very high. Now, that said, I don't have the exact stats that say how successful first-time buyers are, second-time buyers, or all that kind of stuff. What I do know is 40 to 50% of our buyers are repeat buyers. So people keep coming back and buying again and again. We have a lot of portfolio people that we deal with. And this tells me that the system must be working and the listings must be good, because otherwise people wouldn't be coming back.
Yeah. Do you follow up? Do you have some system to follow up with people like 6 months, 12 months after their purchase to see if it's successful or not?
Well, we don't have a system to see if it's successful, but we have a system definitely to say, hey, you bought a site in this niche. We have a site in the same niche. Do you want to buy it? And that's obviously been very successful for us. So most of those people will come back and buy again.
So a couple of final questions. What are your tips for buyers? Like, as a buyer, how would I find the best deals? And how would I find kind of something that's a really good deal?
Well, the one thing that I would do is definitely come up with a list of criteria. I would try to focus on one or two monetization types. I would try to make sure that you understood, what type of traffic you're dealing with. And if you're not a physical product person, then stick with affiliate sites, that kind of thing. I wouldn't be too specific about niches. All the time we get people that say, oh, I only want something that does, this, or this. And a lot of times that's just too specific and it's too hard to find. You're better off focusing on the numbers and the criteria in terms of monetization and traffic. That's really going to be more important in my opinion. The other thing I would do is take your budget and divide by 3. You can really mitigate your risk as a first-time buyer by dividing by 3. If you have $200,000 and you buy businesses for $70,000 each, it's very unlikely that you're going to go broke because you're not going to get 3 lemons in a row. And that's one of the ways to make sure that your risk is mitigated and that you've had a lot better of a overall experience. And something that we recommend to buyers all the time. And the last thing I'll say is get on the phone with the seller. I said it before and I'll say it again. You could sit there and look at spreadsheets all day, but the end business is done between people. And if you get on the phone and you find out the guy is an asshole, sorry, excuse me, I hope that's okay to say, you're not going to do business with them anyway. So why keep on doing all this due diligence, looking at all these numbers, focusing on spreadsheets and driving yourself crazy if you don't like who the seller is and you don't trust them? Get on the phone, ask them some questions, have a normal list of questions that you ask sellers, and you'll find a good gem that way.
Yeah, very good tips. So divide your money, get on a call with a seller, and have some criteria.
Yeah.
And finally, what's next for Empire Flippers? What are your current goals? Are you just trying to grow as much as you can? Maybe planning for an exit?
Well, I don't see us having an exit anytime soon. Justin and I just love running the company too much. Obviously, we're always focused on growth, doing larger and larger deals. I think that we're going to be closing 8-figure deals soon. So we closed a number of 7-figure deals this year, and I think our 8-figure deal is just right around the corner. But the real push for me in the last 12 months has been our new Empire Flippers platform. And right now it's in beta. If anyone in your audience is looking to be part of the beta, they can just email support@empireflippers.com and we'll sign them up. But what this is really allowing us to do is to be a broker and a platform and a marketplace at the same time. Right now, the experience at Empire Flippers is you come to a WordPress site, you click on a page, you place a deposit or use your VIP code, and everything is done via email. That's not a very effective way of going ahead and getting things done. So we wanted to create a great customer experience with a dashboard that went ahead and had a lot of bells and whistles. So people could track all of their deposits, make sure that they were doing their due diligence in a organized way, and that sellers could see information about their listing, how many visits they had, who were the depositors, all this kind of information, rather than trying to email us all the time and back and forth and back and forth. So there's going to be a lot of automation in there. We're still going to be walking you through the process, still going to be that white glove service. There's also going to be this layer of software to help you interact with us.
Yeah, that's great. It sounds like some major changes are coming up, and it's going to give more power to the sellers and the buyers and more control. So that's great.
Cool.
Well, thank you for joining, Joseph. And finally, how can people reach you or ask you a question?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you have any questions, you can just email me at joe@empireflippers.com. And if you have any questions in general about Empire Flippers, you're unable to reach me, you can always reach our support. They're available 24/7, support@empireflippers.com.
All right. Thank you, Joseph. Nice to talk to you today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
And thanks to you, listeners. And if you liked this episode, please give us a positive review on iTunes.
Domain Magnet is a leader in buying and selling online businesses with a proven track record of expertise gained from over 300 deals since 2004. To learn more about how we can help you acquire or exit a profitable online business today, head over to domainmagnet.com for more details.